Need to make sure they're paying prevailing wage. I know, right?
Okay, it is 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the regular Board of Education meeting for the Kaneland District 302 Board of Education. We would like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. And if you will rise and we will say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Witt?
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Here.
Mrs. Junk? Here. Mr. Carey?
Here.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Here.
Dr. Lawler and Mrs. Simmons are absent.
Okay, with 5 members present, we have a quorum. Yay. Are there any items that board members would like to move from consent to new business? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. The approval of the agenda tonight is as amended. We're going to amend it to include an additional closed session topic, which is topic 2C11 for litigation. And we're also amending, because there are a couple of date changes under the approval of personnel. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mrs. Junk? Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. And we are now at the Board of Superintendent salutes. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Layden.
Yes, thank you. Happy to bring some new staff members or new administrators and administrators that are not new but in a new place and introduce you to them. And I will start. Each one of them will come up to the microphone. They will share their name, the building that they're going to be working in, the position that they're going to be working in, and something they're looking forward to this year. All right. So we will start with, to break it in for the truly new people, I'll start with Brian Zerfis. Brian, please come up and join us.
Good evening. My name is Brian Zerfis. I was formerly the assistant principal at both John Shields and McDowell Elementary Schools, moving over to the principalship at McDowell Elementary School. I'm really excited for that. The thing I'm most looking forward to this upcoming school year is just continuing to be a part of our amazing community, to help drive so many different things forward that we have going on, and really, really excited to get the school year started off. I'm kind of shocked that we're just about a week away now. So really looking forward to it and really excited for the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next is Molly Tucker.
Hello, I'm Molly Tucker. I will be the assistant principal at John Stewart Elementary as well as Blackberry Creek Elementary. And I am just so excited to be part of this Kaneland community and really start building relationships with both our students and families and of course the staff members at both buildings also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Jay Boudin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Boudin, the assistant principal at Harder Middle School. I'm most excited that I get to continue my career in education in the Kaneland community. I was actually a student teacher when I was at NIU, and I was at the high school. So I started my career in education in the Kaneland community, and I'm just beyond blessed that I get to continue working and serving our staff and making the educational experience for our students in the community just incredible and amazing. Thank you.
Welcome.
Nicole Mcallister.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nicole Mcallister. I was formerly the assistant principal at Harder Middle School for the past 6 years, the assistant principal for student services, and I have the honor of now being the special education coordinator for the Kaneland School District. I'm extremely excited to be working with EC12, so it'll give me the opportunity to work with the itty bitties all the way up to our oldest, and I hope that I can just carry out Kaneland's mission and vision to the best of my ability. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Tanya Pachnick.
Hello, I'm Tanya Pachnick. I will be the new Assistant Principal of Student Services and Special Education at Kaneland High School. I'm just excited to be here serving the community and really being part of starting up the SEL program that will be starting at the high school. Thank you.
Welcome.
And last but certainly not least, Kara Christensen.
Hi, my name is Kara Christensen. I'm the new assistant principal at Kaneland, John Shields, and McDowell Elementary Schools. This will be my 4th year here in Kaneland. I've been a teacher and interventionist at John Shields for the past 3 years. So I'm excited to transition into this position and really get to know the students, staff, families, and Kaneland community at both schools. And I'm really excited about all of our Kaneland Connect schools that we have going on this year as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Horn was already recognized earlier, but Mr. Horn, if you could give us a wave, the new high school principal, Kaneland High School, back to support his new assistant principal. So with that, if you would, please give all of our new administrators a warm Kaneland welcome. At a future board meeting, we will bring, as we shared before, our new staff in, and we will do it with all of our new staff together rather than building by building. We'll have an early meeting. We'll start about 6:30, not the early meeting, but an early pre-meet of meet and greet with our new staff, and an opportunity to meet all of our new staff at a future meeting. So we'll make sure that we plan that far enough out in advance so you can adjust your schedules to be able to be here by 6:30, if possible. So thank you, and that was all I had for salutes. Sorry, Dr. James Horn. Congratulations, Dr. Horn. Needed to pick up the context clue from a colleague, but congratulations, Dr. Horn.
That's it. Thank
Got
you.
it. Thank you.
Anything, Dr. Fuchs?
No, thank you.
Okay. We'll move on then. Tonight's consent agenda contains the following action items: the approval of the treasurer's report from July 2022, the approval of minutes of the July 25th, 2022 regular meeting, the approval of personnel, the approval of the destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from February 2021, the approval of a motion not to release closed session minutes from January through June 2022, the approval of accounts payable with a correction to the July 25th, 2022 report, and the following informational items: the employee and position report. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. And it is as amended because we amended the personnel earlier.
So moved.
And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. This is the first opportunity for public comment. We have two, we normally have two, but tonight we will have three because there is a public hearing. One for the public hearing, though, will be specifically on that topic. So this is the first general topic, public comment session. The board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into a debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you do so at the microphone, which is over there. State your name and the village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. You are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. With that being said, I'll call the first person who signed up, which is Mr. Jerry Elliott.
Thank you. I'm Jerry Elliott. I live at 39W686 Prairie Street in Aurora. That's my postal address. I'm a Sugar Grove resident for over 50 years. 3 children are graduating from this school. I rise in opposition of the district selling the 1.3 million in working cash fund bonds for the purpose of increasing district working cash. I'm very confused by the following data that I've looked up. As to the working cash fund budget amount for 2022 was $98,010 versus $103,000 budgeted for 2021. So in other words, there's 5,000 less than last year that we budgeted for. Yet the revenue fund balance left over from what we spend as of July 2022 is 1.7 million versus July 21, 1.5 million. It's 155,000. It's more that's remaining left over expenditures than last year. So we've got extra money. So we're budgeting to spend less this coming year, yet we have 155,000 more to spend than last year. So why would there be a need for another emergency 1.3 million? It's not really budgeted at all. I don't understand that. This proposed 1.3 will be adding to the 12 million that were already being levied every year to us taxpayers to pay off bonds. The bond levy is added over and above the limiting tax cap. So our general tax cap bill this last year already is providing 1.2 million more to the district to spend than last year. I have a question as to how much money is enough, really, especially in this time for food and fuel costs are unbearable for taxpayers. I'm very confused as to what is going on with this proposal for more and more cash money. But please ask you to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The second speaker tonight is Mr. Dan Nagel.
I'm Dan Nagel. My residence is 39W880 Prairie Street, Aurora, Post Office. I'm a Sugar Grove Township resident. I was on the township board about 40 years and have lived in the township about 60 years. I rise in the opposition to the district selling 1.3 million working capital fund bonds for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund. I propose hardworking people deserve accountability for their taxes, and that'll be spent at the school. So, you know, I was when I was on the township board, that was the biggest thing we had was people would come in to us, and then I called the school, you know, about what's going on, and I says, you know, if everybody is going along, you want good schools, everything else, so everything else has got to follow through. So they, you know, we show them the spreadsheet of what goes where on the tax bill, and of course the schools take the highest amount. So anyway, last year's ending June 1st, 21, audit of the books revealed that the district took 101 million in revenue and spent 96.4 million for that year. 62.7 million was from local taxes, an increase of 1.6%. That's your taxpayers, okay? Student enrollment was 4,031, showing a decline of 16% over a 10-year period. Dollars spent divided by enrollment equals 23,907 per student. Turn around and, you know, for education for this. Plus whatever you parents are paying for extra fees and out of pocket for classes and stuff like that. A lot of the money for sure. All the money is a serious issue to citizens supporting the school, especially during this time of high inflation. The district ended last year with opposing long-term debt of $127.6 million. I suspect that we ended up with the same amount now. As for the bond debt service for the next 7 years, we owe $54.2 million in general obligation bonds and $25.8 million in capital appreciation bonds. Now, these capital appreciation bonds are special since the accreditation/interest costs are 7.8 million or 30.3%. Excuse me, that's 30%. That is a serious juice on this loan. So people, that's some of the stuff that we have to pay, which we're not, again, we're trying to show you what's out there.
That's
the
time.
burden-
If you can wrap it up in the next few seconds, that'd be great. That's your 3 minutes.
Excuse me. I have to take a little more time and to tell you about another event last month. You and the board approved a June 22nd accounts payable charge. One of these charges was a MasterCard for $2,526 for a beachfront facility in Michigan City, Indiana. Apparently, some of the district administrators needed a 3-day beachfront retreat for planning school functions. Seems this school board and its members question very little controlling costs at the school. Just ask for more and more, and it comes from the taxpayer. And I was on the other side fighting for the school district. And when I was not the assessor, but to the assessor, which comes out of our office. So I'm not putting this lightly. I'm saying people, if they look at your audited statements, they would find some stuff. So, I mean, they got to scratch their head. So anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Ms. Sheila Albano. No, it's something. Oh, thank you. I mean, real quick, I'm going to interrupt you just real quick. Could you put this as part of the record?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, and the other one too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for waiting.
No problem.
Go ahead.
I'm Sheila Albano. I am an alumni, taxpayer, and a mother of 2 graduates from Kaneland. I'm also a member, was asked to be a member of the community committee that met a couple weeks ago as the first discussion about possible facility improvements coming in the future. And the only reason I'm talking now is because if I wait for public comments after the presentation I know you guys are going to give, I won't be able to say in time what I need to say. So, looking at your report that was published on the website of the district and the recommendations from the administration off of that report, as a committee member and as someone who worked very hard to get people to fill out your surveys for you, one of the things I was told over and over again was it doesn't really matter. They've already made their decisions. They're going to do what they're going to do anyway. And I assured them that that was not the case. Looking at your options, the 2 options you've given, I'm very concerned that 2 of them, in both cases, your report is going to say that the Ignite Academy and the front change of the front entrance had actually negative numbers in support. In fact, I think you believe you say there's almost an opposition to it. And yet, in both cases, one of the options has both of them on it, and the other option has one of them on it. I would much prefer that the board take some extra time. I don't believe we can get a referendum passed by November anyway. I think it's a terrible idea. But I would much rather that you take some extra time and let us on the committee or whatever other committee you want to put together investigate where we could spend that 8 million or possibly even 12 million, because the reorganization is probably not going to be needed in the exact way that you've got it laid out on your maps, because your baseball coach doesn't want 2 new brand new ball fields, and your softball team doesn't want 2 softballs. They just want fixed what they have. So you aren't going to need all of those sidewalks and things that you're going to put out behind the middle school. Regardless, I would like the board to take some time beyond tonight and when you vote and look at what we might be able to do with that extra money, putting it into either Fox Valley or perhaps updating your transportation and mechanical buildings, moving them in preparation for down the road, building the field house instead of just plunking 48 million as a field house, which is not a legitimate number. We were not given any numbers for what it would cost to just take care of those buildings. It was just one lump sum number. So please think that through, and I would rather that you give it more time and than to pick one of those two options. I think it'd be very, very difficult to go out to the community and say, when they say we don't want these two things, and then say, well, here it is. We're going to spend the money anyway. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So those are the only 3 people that were signed up, but there's still additional time left in public comment because we allow 30 minutes. Is there anyone who didn't sign up who has a public comment? It's Tanya Grosinger.
Tonya Groswinger from Maple Park. I'll make this really quick. My big thing right now is with the master facilities plan, the Fox Valley Career Center. From mine, if I'm remembering correctly, it was roughly a 15 million renovation. We're not the only district that uses the facility. So how are we going to get Geneva, Batavia, St. Charles, and all the other districts to help us pay for it? Because it shouldn't just be burdened on the Kaneland taxpayers. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Any other public comments? Okay. Hearing none, we will move on then. We're going to move on to the first item of new business, which is conducting a public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Education to sell $1.3 million in working cash fund bonds for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund. So the first thing I will do is open the public hearing at 7:21. And I will turn it, so public hearing is now open, and I will turn it over to Dr. Fuchs for an explanation.
Great, thank you. So, based on the public comments tonight, let me review the process of what we're doing to make sure that there's a complete understanding by the board of where the money is coming from and where the money is going to. The board has multiple funds. One of the funds is called the Bond and Interest Fund. The money for that fund comes from property taxes. It is outside of the tax cap. The county clerk each year calculates how many bond payments we have that year and sends it to the district in order that we can make our bond payments. The way that we got those bonds, outstanding or payments, is through approved referendums from our community. Each year, the money that the county clerk sends us, they send us in Kane County 1% extra in case if there's taxpayers that don't pay their tax bills. So that's one way that the Bond and Interest Fund accumulates money over time. The second way that the Bond and Interest Fund accumulates money over time is through interest earnings. In the last couple years, that's been minimal, but over the last however many years, it's accumulated. So what our goal is through this bond sale is to sell a working cash bond for 30 days. We'll sell the bond and put the money in the working cash fund. Then we'll pay off that bond within 30 days. We'll pay it off. We're going to pay it off with the excess money that's just sitting in the Bond and Interest Fund. That money that is sitting in the Bond and Interest Fund cannot be used for anything else. Our general obligation bonds that are currently outstanding do not allow for prepayment. They can't be refinanced until 2025. And so this is one of the only legal ways in which we can clean up the bond and interest fund so that there's not money sitting in there and not doing anything for the district. Once we put it in the working cash fund and we pay off that bond, we'll then take that money, and the first place we'll transfer it to is operations and maintenance. And I believe that same night we'll have another transfer from operation and maintenance to the capital projects fund. The purpose of getting it into the capital projects fund, the 1.3 million, is so that next summer, when we do an abundance of projects, we have extra money to use. It's money that came from the bond and interest fund that's sitting there right now. It will not cost the taxpayers except for a small amount of interest for 30 days. The estimate on that was about $5,000 to $6,000 for the time period that it's outstanding, and it'll be paid off in 30 days. Hang on one second. Let me see. I just want to make sure we follow the process.
I think public
Yep.
comment comes first.
Sure.
And then we discuss after.
No worries.
I think, right, Julian?
It actually, the board, any questions or comments by the board are heard first, then
Okay.
public comments. So
Okay.
switch that around. Yep, thank you. So Ryan, Mr. Carey, it appears you have a question.
No, I'm going to try and restate what you just said so I make sure I understood what you said.
Okay,
All right, so we get money from taxes that are for the outstanding bonds that we issued a long time ago to build schools.
that is true.
That money sits in a fund, and over time, we've gotten some interest on that money.
Yes,
The only legal way to get that money out of the fund is to issue the bonds and go through this rigmarole to move the money to somewhere else so that we can spend it.
yes,
So we're not incurring new debt.
no,
It's a silly, well,
we're cleaning up.
it's a legal way to do something that's a lot of hurdles. Okay.
That is true. And it has nothing to do with the revenue and expenditures on an annual basis for the working cash fund. The working cash fund on an annual basis, we levy within the tax cap about $100,000, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And right now, that money continues to accumulate in the working cash fund. That money that's accumulating from that purpose will still be in that fund until the board chooses to do something with it.
That money over time, that's where you give us the list of CDs and whatnot you have. That's probably some of the money that's.
Yes, that I invest.
You went, sorry, just.
Oh, go ahead.
You said something that I didn't quite catch though. You
Okay.
said the county sends us an extra 1%.
Yes. So, and what that is called is a loss. Hang on one second. Loss. What do they call that?
Lost cost collection.
Thank you. Lost cost collection. So when they send us the money to pay for our bonds,
Okay.
they also send us a 1% extra
Okay.
each year.
Where's that 1% come from?
Taxpayers from the
1%
county.
of what?
Yeah, that's where you're losing me.
1% of the outstanding bonds.
So if we've got
It's a little bit each year,
$100 in bonds outstanding, they send us,
1%.
but that's not part of our tax limiting because it's bonds, not operating.
That's correct. It's separate.
All right.
Yep.
I understand.
And they send it to us so that we are able to make our bond payments. Because if they shorted us because maybe a taxpayer didn't pay their bill, then we wouldn't be able to make our bond payments without dipping into the operating funds. So that's why they do that. That's in Kane County. Every county is a little different.
Okay.
So let me clarify. The taxes, the property taxes that constitute this approximately 1.3 million have already been paid and collected.
Yes?
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And in so many words, this is like a fund sweep.
Yes. And when you said collected, that is over years of,
Yeah.
yeah, because I've been here since 2009, and I've never, quote, cleaned up this fund. because it's just accumulated over time. Yep. Adam?
Is
Mr.
there any
Gonzalez?
benefit to not going through this process?
Pardon?
Is there any benefit to not going through this process to letting it continue to accumulate?
It will just sit there and we'll invest it and it'll just
grow.
sit there. You still won't be able to do anything with it until you move it. You could transfer interest into other funds, but you can't do anything with the 1%.
Is there a reason that we're going through the process at this point? Is it the need?
We have,
for the
yes.
facilities?
Yep.
Okay.
We've identified that we have over $19 million of projects that need to be done. And this is one way in which we can get money that doesn't cost the taxpayers and it cleans up our funds.
So that's why we're electing to do it at this point rather than later or.
Right. And once we do this, the 1% will still come every year. The money will still earn interest and it'll start to accumulate again over time.
And we've had the issue with the capital projects for some time now, several years, where we only had a certain amount that we could spend, and we had more projects than we had money.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, hearing none, I will now invite public comments on this topic, on the bond issue, keeping in mind the public comments guidelines stated earlier in the evening. Are there any public comments on the bond issue? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing then at 7:31. And I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the proposal to sell bonds in the amount of $1.3 million for the purpose of increasing the working cash fund of the district. I'll second it. And a roll call when you're ready, please.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you for all of that.
Thank you.
We will move on now to J2, which is the presentation and discussion on the master facility plan and the community engagement process.
Thank you. There are multiple parts of this with guests also taking part. But to get started, I'll turn it over to Dr. Boudin. She can a brief reminder of what led us to this point and what the plans are for tonight, and then we'll have some opportunity for the board to ask questions and see.
Great. Thank you very much. This process began prior to COVID and was interrupted by COVID as the high school embarked on a master facility planning process. That process included lots of staff, a community committee, and administrators to help identify the needs of the high school. Once we had our master facility plan in order, the board authorized the administration to engage with a community engagement consultant. And through the public bidding process, E.O. Sullivan was selected. We have representatives here tonight from E.O. Sullivan, as well as from Wold Architect. E.O. Sullivan in the past, I would say, they started in December with the first unofficial survey, and then now most recently in July with the public survey. They're going to explain the process and the results of the public feedback that the board wanted us to gather for this purpose. And so what I'd like to do is invite Mr. Ed Sullivan and also Mr. Rich Carter from E.O. Sullivan, and then Mr. Dan Critta from Wold Architect up to the microphone. We will work together to make sure you can see what they're talking about, as well as they can pass, back and forth the microphone and share their findings from our community engagement. So, gentlemen, thank you. You're not coming up, just Mr. Sullivan? All right. There you go. We'll wait for you. Sounds good.
I think I'll take the mic for now and explain kind of the process, and then as questions arise, we'll have other people that can come up.
Sounds good.
But first off, thanks for having me back. It's been a little bit, and we've been very busy with the RFP process for community engagement that has culminated. So this is really the final report, if you will, on what we have found out. What we've always talked about through all these meetings was, at the end of this, we want the board and the administration to be in a better place than they were before we started. Whether that's a referendum or just knowing what the likes and dislikes and what the community wants, that's the main focus of this process that we've taken place. So I'm gonna, I believe last week you received our report. I'm gonna kind of go through that, try and explain further the detail on, you'll see a couple charts up on the video monitor that I'll go into more detail so you have a further understanding of it, but I'm gonna go over through the report in the interim. So with everything, we start with messaging, and that's really the why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? And for our messaging, we really started with what the mission is, and the mission was to graduate all students college, career, and community ready. That's the mission of the school, and so we begin our messaging by talking about that. We also talk about how Kaneland is such a large school district. It really is the heart of the community. Throughout all the presentations that we did, you would hear Dr. Layden talk about the example of a family that wanted to move into Kaneland. Well, where's the town of Kaneland? Well, there isn't one. Kaneland is the heart of this school district and heart of the community. And so we really kind of pushed into that. But then, you know, we've pivoted to the challenges that were faced by the district, and specifically what happens within the school district or the high school. And so we talked about some of the significant challenges, and we really talked about, you know, the kids deserve better. They deserve better facilities. They deserve a better environment for athletics and for learning. Teachers certainly deserve better facilities in which to instruct these kids. And so we really then said, hey, this is the collaborative process. This is a bottom-up approach. This isn't the administration or the Board of Education telling the community this is what we're going to do. This is gauging input, gauging ideas on a menu of options. We threw out 10 options for people to consider and to rank and get their input. And then we also talked about some funding levels, potential funding levels, and that's what this report's going to be. So from there, we had a menu survey. The district conducted a phone survey to gauge support of each potential individual project and potential funding levels. We do this to get to intuitive responses. And so we're going to collect data three ways. The first way in the survey is your intuitive response, your gut reaction to someone asks you a question, what's your response? So that's one way that we collected survey data. We had a community committee. This was a broad group of individuals throughout the district that met. They had and obviously we have a member from the gave great feedback within this committee process, also came to the community events as well, and gave great feedback and helpful there too. But that's more of, we want to explain a little bit more, gauge your reactions from the beginning of the meeting to the end to get further types of feedback. There was one of those that took place in July 18th. And I will discuss the feedback results later in my presentation. We had 3 community committee meetings, different dates. 2 of them were in person, 1 of them was virtual. The idea was really to give everybody an opportunity to try and give their input, whether it's in the morning, evening, and then obviously online. So that's more of the impassioned, the passioned group of people. If you are connected to the schools or not connected to the schools, but you come to a meeting, whether it's at night or it's online or it's on a weekend, that's a passionate response. That's someone that's really taking the time out of their day to come and say, hey, you know, we talked about this, can I learn a little bit about what you're doing? We look at that as what's called the passionate response. And then the community committee was obviously the wrong way to say it, but the more learned response. So you're learning a little bit more because we have a little more time to explain things, to build a dialogue, to have discussions. And so those are the 3 different ways that we reached out to the community to collect data. And so if you add the very first informal survey, as I guess the best way we put it, we've collected nearly 1,400 response points, data points. and I'll go into each individual ones as we go along. But I want to get into the data a little bit, and then I will individual projects, and then I'll get into the specifics so you have a better understanding of the board. The community engagement analysis, as I said, 3 different data points or 3 different types of data that we collected. What we found also through our survey, and it's critical going forward, is what's the opinion of the community towards the administration and the board? And within our survey, we found that the favorability rate was 68% versus the unfavorable rate of 27% for a net. And when you hear a lot of the data that I'm talking about, the net favorability rate of 41%, that's a good number. That's a positive number that we certainly see through people that are here tonight. We saw it in all the meetings that we had. People are engaged. We saw a lot of data that to kind of prove out that. But it was good discussions. It was quality discussions that the administration, obviously, in our report, we can move forward. So there's 10 individual projects that we put forth that I know are part of the report that totaled roughly $122 million broken out. What we found is the public, so through the survey, public supports nearly all the potential individual projects. There's 3 of them that kind of rise to the top. Investing in infrastructure and mechanicals at a net positive of 60%. Investing in student supports, resources and supports at a net 49% positive, and modern learning environments of a net 48%. From there, you kind of back off in percentage of positivity to the next group. There's 4 of them. So you have the Fox Valley Career Center at 21%, improved athletic facilities at 16, campus reorganization at 11, and new field house at 7. Then you have some, as was discussed earlier, that have a negative overall support. I'll go into what you're seeing now versus ranking items in a menu, and there is a different look at those. So on the receiving, the negative is collaborative spaces is -2, new high school entrance -5, and Ignite Learning Academy of -9. So while support levels for the general public are important to review, the most important data is ranking some of these projects. And so Kaneland residents, and to put this in perspective, how we collected the data. So outside of the survey, on the meetings that we had the 10 items, and we asked people to rank them 1 through 10 using 10 numbers. You can't use each number twice. That gives us a way that we can rank them based on the amount of responses they got per item. Think about it this way. If you're just asked about an item on a survey, you're probably going to I really like that. But when we force you to choose between multiple items, then certain items rise to the top. And that's the best way to explain how we collect that data. And I'll certainly go into that more in a bit. So while support levels, Kaneland residents have 3 clear top priorities: infrastructure and mechanicals, when you collect all the data and point to rankings, modern learning environments, and student resources and supports. Next in priority are the projects related to athletics, improved athletic facilities, a new field house, and then the lower priorities are the Fox Valley Career Center, campus reorganization. Both of these priorities are higher priorities with those less engaged with the schools. And so those people that don't have kids in school and so forth, that's a less of priority as we looked at some of the data. So the final 3 projects tested are not priorities for the district, as we talked about: collaborative spaces, new high school entrance, and the Ignite Learning Academy. When you talk about not priorities, it means when you rank the 10 priorities, they're at the bottom. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not priority or might not need to be put forth. Obviously, sometimes the administration has to think some of this just needs to be done, but you wouldn't go to the public and say, hey, these are our top priorities, and these, so you'd want to fund them last when you talk about them. We also talk about potential funding levels, and it's kind of a generic question of, all right, so what's your comfort level with the amount of money that potentially could be raised through a referendum? What we found that is very encouraging, there's only 15% favoring no additional funding. So once again, we had the rankings of, oh yes.
What slide are you on?
Oh, so I'm just going kind of through the narrative right now.
Okay.
After this section of funding levels, I'm going to go to the slides.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're towards, all right.
Yes.
It's on the last page of the narrative.
So I'm on the last page of the narrative.
Okay.
Once again, they were asked the 3 options plus a 4th option of no funding. On the survey, they obviously could say no opinion, and so there's a 5th option, and I'll get into that. So once again, 15% saying no additional funding, which obviously means there's an awful lot of people that think some lot of funding level is something that should go forward. So what we typically see whenever we do surveys that go out to the general public, they're typically going to pick the lowest funding level. In this case, they did, and they then followed that up by picking the medium funding level. So it's when you ask the public through the survey to choose, the lowest funding level came first, the medium funding level came a very close second. Statistically, you would look at maybe being somewhere in between there. But when we see folks that are more engaged, specifically the committee members, they automatically go to a higher funding level because they know a little bit more about what the problems and what are the solutions and so forth. And so that's why you do community engagement, is to see, okay, if you bring a group of people some information, how do they change their opinion, or what are they going to think of down the line? And so that's how we track some of that data to get to where we came. And so obviously those more passionate about Kaneland are slightly more favorable towards increased funding levels, ranking the medium funding level first and then the low funding level. The committee of individuals that we had also did the same thing there. I do want to go to the slides so you have I can explain this a little bit better for you. So the first slide is the committee. Okay, you have it up correctly. The committee feedback. There's 9 committee members, so there's 9 responses that generated this data. So the first 10 items that were the menu items, if you will, that were asked, that we discussed, and they had learned kind of what would take place and what the costs are, what the benefits are, what the issues might be with them. When we ask 1 through 10, and they have to put 10 numbers, the lower the number is better because more people picked at 1 or picked at 2. And so the average of all the people that responded is the number that we took, and so the lowest number is what you want. So 2.23 on infrastructure and mechanicals, modern learning environments of 2.56, improved athletic facilities. So that's how we generate where the committee was in regard to the responses. So when you move down the line, you can see at the very end was campus reorganization, Ignite Personalized Academy, and then Fox Valley Career Center, with campus reorganization probably being obviously far and beyond the one that wasn't the highest priority. And once again, we don't want to say that people don't want it. It's just given an array of choices, it was the least priority. And so as a board, you use that as saying, okay, so we need to stress the community wants us to focus on the top 3 or 4 or 5 versus the bottom. And that's the data that you can take away whether you go to referendum or not. Potential funding levels. Once again, we asked the question of 4 very specific numbers. Medium for this committee feedback was above and beyond the highest choice for the committee. So really the same thing took place with the 3 community meetings along with any online surveys that were given to us. There were a total of 154 responses in the 3 community meetings and some online responses. Once again, 1 through 10, infrastructure and mechanicals came in as the lead, modern learning environments, student resources, and supports are the top 3 with new high school entrance, Ignite Personalized Academy, and Fox Valley Career Center is the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we switch this? Do I have something?
Nope, you're good. Can you please go back to the slide you just had and now scroll down?
Oh,
thank you.
Sorry. And so we did the exact same thing with a higher response rate because we had more people show up. We had multiple meetings, different times. We had a very large online presence, which was nice to see. And so once again, from a data perspective, you as the board and administration can take this data and say, okay, if there was a pot of money, where would we start based on community input? And so starting with the top to the bottom is where you would build either a program for a referendum or a program for future building that you potentially would do. And then obviously dealing with potential referendum, we ask funding levels. Once again, you see as the medium funding level comes in as the top for the committee as a whole. So the last, do we have the survey responses?
Yep. It's the Excel file, please.
Yep.
At the bottom of your screen.
There we go.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm going to start on the left. Sometimes people ask us, well, why do you ask all this demographic data? Is that really needed? Specifically, sometimes people get into ideology and say, well, this is a political thing. You just want to find out what's going on there. When you do a scientific survey, you want to find and match the demographics of your community. You wouldn't want to oversample families that have kids in the school district. That would skew your data. You wouldn't want to sample more liberal members of the community, because we think and have found that that would skew your data to the positive side. So for what we do is we have several data companies, demographic companies, that help us build a model, if you will, for this community. And in this instance, our margin of error was 3.73, which anybody that's done surveying, polling, data of that nature understands that that is a tremendous margin of error. Within this survey, we received 653 responses. Of a community this size, generally we look for 300, 350 and figured that would be a pretty good number. We received 653, which is absolutely outstanding data. So, you know, you can look at the data, age breakdown, gender, more females and males. We know that the ethnicity is mainly white, next is Hispanic. It's a conservative district. You have some farming communities, obviously. So the liberal population is much less. And so the data they received, we find, is even better from the standpoint of there are more conservative members of the district, or let me rephrase it, people that identify themselves as conservative members on this poll filled this out and were very supportive of the different things that took place. And then connection, the good point here on connection is there's only 40% of people that had kids in the school, which means there was 60% of the respondents had no connection. Well, let me rephrase it. Did not have kids in the school. And so that's certainly something that we like to see as well. And then Kaneland opinion, what's the positivity for the school district? It's a net plus 41. So from there, we know that there was 10%. They were asked to what their opinion on them was. And generally, you would see that for the most part, you're going to find people that are going to be favorable to these projects. What we really like to see is the box to the right, that you have to choose. You can't say, I like all these projects, or, you know, I would say at some point the net favorability on a few of them was in the negative. We ask you to choose. And this really gives you the data points of what you should lead with if you're going to do some construction, or what you should lead with if you're going to ask for a referendum you should put on the ballot. Obviously, for the community, if there would be a referendum, there would be a question. Those questions are guided by law on what they can and can't put on there. And anything that is in that question is something that must be spent on. Bond referendums, you cannot put that money into educational rate funds. It has to all be for construction. And so we asked the same thing in regard to the potential funding level. Oh, and in the analysis that I did, when I say net, what we're talking about is if you add the numbers for strongly support and somewhat support, you get a positivity rate. You ask somewhat opposed and strongly opposed, you get a negative number. The difference between there is our net number that I've been talking about within the document. So I just wanted to make sure you understood exactly how we arrived at all that. And so once again, here you see that from the public standpoint, they chose the low number at 35% and then the median number at 32%. So statistically similar. I would say that what we take away that from the data experts is that somewhere in between those numbers would be more appropriate for the public, the ones that are engaging their intuitive reactions to a question asked. We know that the committee that of 9 were more in line with the median number than the low. And then obviously the community as a whole, same thing. They were more in line with the median number and then the low number. And so that's how we arrived at those data points. So in the end, what really does it all mean? You have a document from Dr. Fuchs that kind of talks about next steps. We believe using this, we were going to come up with a plan that basically the experts from us making recommendations, we would recommend the medium funding level. With the times that we see, the economy potentially might get worse. Inflation might continue to be a problem going forward, and we think it will. So we think that knowing that the public wants somewhere in between there, something below $70 million would be a good number to move forward for a referendum. And that was the, based on all the close to, I don't know, 1,400 points of feedback we received, that's the recommendation that we would make. And that is included in the document of the first 3 pages of the document that the administration has sent to you. But with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and we have an architect expert for any specifics, if you will.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Before we talk about the options and things like that are in the first couple pages, what I'd like to do is see if the board has any questions about the community engagement, and then we can move forward into the options and the recommendation from the administration.
I wanted to make a comment. I'm impressed that you were able to get, that's when we set out on this, we were like, but we need to understand, what the rest of the community feels. We hear from the people within the school district, and you got a great response, and it looks like, it was evenly distributed. So I'm pleased that we have data that we can rely on. So thank you.
I would like to say it was all us. It's not. It's your community.
Sure.
The reason I said that, this whole Kaneland community is really just that. We had just great meetings, I would say, and great feedback. And then obviously a great response rate. We haven't seen that type of survey response rate. It's usually somewhat tough. We have to call multiple times. It's a lot of work to get that response rate, but we will. This was easy. It was easily done.
Great. Thank you. Questions, board members?
Go ahead. All right, so if I'm reading your chart right, and I'm having a hard time, if I look at the field house, I had the strongly support and the somewhat support. I get a 51% were in favor of a field house, just the idea of one. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so 51%.
Okay, but the same group of people didn't like the idea of spending enough money to build the field house.
So the field house came in 7th out of 10 as the recommended menu items.
But if I go to your other chart, it's number 4 on the chart.
So
surveys.
Remember we talked about the 3 different ways that we collect data. So this is the public intuitive data.
Okay.
Bad way to say it is the unlearned or the not learned or the
Okay.
uninformed, if you will. We like to use intuitive because it sounds better.
Okay.
So the intuitive response is your gut reaction. That's one way to think. We have historically always known that as you learn more about the projects, as you can sit and ask questions of the experts, you tend to go more towards a higher funding level, and you would see a different, somewhat different data survey. What we do like is that the top 3 were consistently the top 3 generally across all of the ways that we collected data. So obviously your community committee is the most informed because they're going to have questions and so forth. And then the community committee, the community meetings were the kind of your more passionate response. They're there for a reason. They're there because they're very fired up to be. But yes.
All right. But if I look at your chart here of the committee feedback, they ranked a new field house number 4. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if we go to the, whatever word you were using, the uneducated group of people, And I don't mean, that sounded bad. That sounded. That's not what I meant.
The intuitive group.
The intuitive group, thank you.
Yes.
They still ranked at number 5.
They ranked in the field house number 7.
Far right.
Athletic facilities is number 4. The field. Okay.
Yes.
And that's the community feedback.
Okay.
I thought the intuitive was on the last page.
So.
Because the community feedback.
ranked at 4. The community that came to the meetings
Yes.
ranked at 5, and the community as a whole through the survey ranked at 7.
Okay.
Yes.
But if I go to this screen that you have up there,
Yes.
it gets a 51% favorable rating.
It gets, well, the net, give me 30 seconds to do math in my head. 30, 44, it's a +6. +6. When you take the two numbers, strongly support, somewhat support, subtract out the somewhat opposed, strongly opposed, you get a net number.
Okay, well, I was just looking, I added together.
Yeah, it's 51%. We
Okay.
generally, that's why we do the second row here. We generally believe that most people are going to say, yeah, that sounds great. You know, I might like that. It's, you know, they're going to have very few times when we see like just people don't want something. Sometimes, you know, it'll be kind of a weird, oh, let's build a new pool. And we're like, no way we're going to build a pool. So we'll see that type of data. This is the data that we really like to see in ranking where things should be, because that forces a person to pick a very specific item. And that's why we do that.
All right.
We'll be here if you have a follow-up, just please ask.
Thank you.
Or I'll give you my card. You can text it or send it. Either.
How was the funding amount explained to them? So when they say, I would spend low, medium, or a lot, like, what did that mean to them? How did you talk through what that looked like in their pocket?
So when we met the committee or the community at the event, the in-person events, we literally brought up a slide. Well, we brought up a slide that talked about there's going to be 3 of them. And then we talked about the medium. Really, here's what the dollar amount is. It can fund a certain amount of projects. And then we did the cost, and the cost, so on the medium of $349 a year, is based off of an average home value price of $280,000, according to your set value average prices. So that's how those were described across the board to all of them. And then obviously for the in-person committee and community, we asked them to rank them with no additional funding as a potential rank. We do that because we get different data points there versus we can't really do that when we do a phone survey.
Hold on one second.
Yes.
Can you please go back to the one that you had before? It's the long list with the bullets. Not that one, the other one, please. And now scroll. And then when you get to that page, try to make it a little bit bigger, please. There you go. This is what you were talking about.
So this
Thank
is
you.
just the obviously letters and numbers versus when we did presentation, we do a more graphic. And look at each individual. This would be a slide. This would be a slide. This would be a slide. So as I said, fund some of the improvements, many of the improvements. This was done after, when everybody knew that there was $122 million in menu items, which correlates to here. If you kind of figured, all right, if you took the field house out, put us in this range, and then obviously a lower range, because we wanted to see, do people, you know, where are they at? You know, it was nice to see very few people said no funding, 15%. So obviously 85% of people thought that investing in their schools was a good thing to happen for the community. From there, our recommendation is to be at a certain point. I know you have a couple options from the administration, and you know our job really is to give you data and let you, the leaders of the community, make those decisions. You could decide not to go to referendum. You still have the data. You still have the information that says here's where the community wants to be. Here are their priorities. Obviously, you have to figure that out. The funding levels.
Do you have any data about the follow through? Like how many of the people who said, who responded, or did the people who, if a majority of the people responded, oh, we want the low funding or medium or somewhere in there, does it actually follow through to the vote there? Or are they like not wanting to say, I don't want to spend any money on the school district when they're talking to somebody on the phone, and then the vote comes through and more people,
So are you
and you don't, in other words,
historically,
you don't
our
find that what they
recommendation-
said was true.
Just so hopefully I'm on the right path. Are you asking historically a recommendation is made, what happens at the vote? For
Yes.
referendum?
Yes. Do you go to the vote and look and see how that correlated
Sure.
with your other data?
We have recommended, prior to this last election, 13 various items. One time we did not recommend they go to referendum. They did anyways, and they lost. They came through a second time and won with our help. And so beyond that, we've had one where we did recommend and they lost. It was the third time that they lost when they brought us in. It got better, got less of a loss, I guess, but they still lost.
Yeah.
So if you're asking the data for us is like 12 and 1. This last time we had 3 referendums, 2 of which we recommended not to go to referendum. They did, and they lost. One of which we said you absolutely go to referendum, you're going to win. The data showed you're going to win, and it's not even going to be close. And they did it. They won with like 68% or something like that.
Okay.
So, it does play out. I don't want to say that
No.
because we make this recommendation, that's what's going to happen. I mean,
No.
we've done these community engagement. The whole purpose is not the top-down approach, but the bottom-up approach. When the community comes and says, here's what we believe should happen, there's buy-in. And so when you get buy-in, you generally are going to have people that are going to support your idea. It just historically, from our perspective of the referendums we won, that's just a snapshot of our company.
I have a question.
Yes.
So getting back to the field house, I'm speculating, and a lot of it's based off of my perception and the way I answer it, but also through discussions with others. One of the things that caused me to lower the priority was the price tag, and really the price tag in relation to the price tag of all the other projects. That and for me it was also the need as opposed to the wants.
Sure.
This may be a stupid question, but are there any other options in terms of bringing in? I mean, is that $48 million number? Maybe a question for you from home. Is that a firm number, or are there options?
So when we start the process, we have to take the needs and try to conceptualize into something that we can actually put a cost estimate to. And I think at the planning, during the facility master planning process, the footprint of that field house was a 4-court field house with an indoor track. So pretty similar to some of the other competing districts nearby. And that was 106,500 square feet. So we just take the metric of what we see current unit price costs and apply that to that. And obviously the crystal ball is a little fuzzier these days with the inflation and so forth, but it's our best estimate of where we think this is going to land out about halfway into the design and construction process. So that's what's targeting that. That's how that number is derived. The other part of that is we also have some periphery things that have to happen for the field house to be placed where it was sited. And there's some buildings that have to move and be relocated that also is in that $48 million number. So it's a combination of that, along with field house, we're creating more impervious space. We have to worry about storm retention. So there's some things that are triggered by the size of that space. You can certainly revisit the size if it's a smaller field house, or you look at it a different way, that could start to bring that price back down. But from a metric of just using conceptual unit costs, now that's without designing a full-blown solution, that's where we have to create our quantities.
Sure.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. My concern is that I would love to have a field house. I think it would be a good opportunity for not just athletics, but other uses within the school. I just don't know that the community has the appetite for it, when it comes to voting. So I'm just trying to
maybe get creative or throw the ball out there, you know, are there other things that can be done to accomplish this while still, you know, meeting expectations or, you know, I don't know if that's the correct phrasing, but you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, at this conceptual stage, it would probably be the size. Could we revisit how many courts? Is it a different size track? Do we look at that footprint a little differently? Because that's really going to drive the conceptual cost. I think citing it, and I wasn't deeply involved with that part of the process, but citing the field house in another location where you might not have to move other buildings. I think we tested some of those options, and that just seemed like it was the logical connection point that makes sense with where other athletic facilities are in the building and parking and influences that are driving that where it landed.
And when you say we, that was a district-wide committee, and Ryan, you served on that committee.
Yeah.
And we had another board member at the time. He's not a
Correct.
board member now, but he was also on that. So it
Staff.
started.
Staff and families too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it started way back, 2019, I think, right?
Yeah, it was pre-COVID.
Okay.
All right. So I've not been shy about the idea that I want to build a field house. Shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but I also understand that we have a 1960s high school that hasn't been updated since then. Is it possible to put a two-part question on a ballot? Like, we want minimum funding to do the mechanicals, and then if you're willing, a field house, is that something we can do?
That's where we would have Chapman and Cutler. You use Chapman?
Mhm, we do.
Chapman, well, 95% of schools use Chapman and Cutler, but generally lead to that. That would be their expertise, their lane. I have seen multiple questions for different funding sources. And so sometimes there's an ed fund rate and a building rate, or a D-sub fund rate and a building rate, debt service extension base.
We have none.
And you have none. Well, there's people that have asked for increases in it. So I've seen
we have none.
Different. Right. That's good. Well, it's not good if you want to fund things, like
right.
From the community's perspective. So yes, I would say probably not, that you can't do a what if or type of question on a bond rate increase.
Could we ask two separate questions?
Yes, I believe you could put two separate questions. It would not be our recommendation to do that.
Because wouldn't they compete against each
They would
other?
compete against each other, correct. That historically
And
is
then-
what we have seen.
The other thing, and this isn't, I know you don't craft the questions or anything like that, but my experience is that the question is going to say, should the Kaneland School District issue or such and bonds and such an amount? It's not going to say to build a field house.
So it can't.
It's just the legalese.
The legalese has
So
to be
nobody's
what,
going to know.
Shall issue for, but then you can add in, as I said earlier, you can add in for, different types of things, to build this school or to do this. You could say to build a field house. You could actually say that. What we would do, should you move forward, is we would help Chapman and Cutler. We work with them literally on every single bond question to get the wording so it would stress some of the things that the community really wants to see. We can talk more about that, but that's an option. But Chapman and Cutler will write the question because you want to make sure everything is legal, and otherwise we have actually had a client write the question on their own. We advise them not to, and then the question was invalid, and then they couldn't go to referendum. So I highly stress you use legal expertise on this.
Okay.
And we told them it was wrong, but it wasn't a school; it was a village.
Yeah. So one of the things as the board discusses this that I think is important. We have two board members who are not here tonight. One of the most important things a school board does is decide to go whether or not to go to referendum. And I would like to open up for discussion whether or not we should make that decision. If we do not make the decision tonight, we cannot go to referendum in November because our next meeting is after the date that is the deadline to file. So,
August 22nd, so there would require an additional board meeting. But August 22nd would be the date that it has to be finalized and submitted.
Well, it wouldn't need, can I ask, I guess, if it, or you could order a special meeting, which is what you're talking about. I'm not suggesting, I'm saying we should either table it or we should.
Teresa, I have one more. In your experience, do school bond referendums do better during a general election or the
Yes.
consolidated?
We believe that the best option, there was the one in June, the one now, and the one in April, and then next March of 2024, or wherever they land their primary date. We believe that this is going to be the best, most favorable referendum going forward because of the mood of the nation, because of you're going to have more people out there. You go into April, typically it's an older population. They're going to be more conservative. They're going to be less likely to increase taxes. So that's some of the process that we've worked for. If we thought that, well, maybe that the community is so overwhelmingly in favor that, you get a good group of people, citizens, and then your parents, then maybe that would be the better one to go. But we believe, and looking at the data, that this would be the best one.
Okay, I'm not negating your expertise at all, but I will say that normally, a lot of research shows that it's better to do the consolidated election because those are that's going to bring out. I mean, the difference is you get a lot of people out in a general election, but they're not there for you. They're there for House and Senate and all that stuff. In the consolidated election, if you can motivate your community, they will come. The people who come out in a smaller election are going to be that. I also I looked it up. Kaneland's history of referenda, and I will tell you, the last one we did was in 2008 for this building. Prior to that, in 7 referenda, one of them we passed in the fall, all the others in the spring. The one for this school was passed in a consolidated election in the spring. It was barely 51 to 49%. It passed by 430 votes. So there are, 18,000 some registered voters in the Kaneland School District, about 18,300. The 2021.
Could you be more specific?
Consolidated were 279 actually from the consolidated election in 2021. And so there were a lot of people we didn't reach, and I know we would have to. I don't know that can we get to them by November? The other thing is district personnel. You can't use district resources. You can't use letterhead. You can't use computers, printers, copiers, the website. District officials cannot say vote yes. They can say this is the need. Board members also have restrictions, not as many, but quite a few. We also can't, advocate and work, directly on the committee. So we need a committee, which we don't have yet, a referendum committee in less than 3 months. The other thing, no district resources. So I've worked on like 3 different referenda over the years before I was a board member. It's tens of thousands of dollars. If you think about postcards and mailings to a 9 community district, it's extremely expensive. So with all that, I don't know that November will work.
Can I explain whether you go to November or you go in April or you go to the following primary? What we would do is we would advise you. It's part of our process. It's not part of your RFP, but it's something that we automatically do because we don't advertise our services. Our services are based on word of mouth on our success rate. Obviously, there's people that like to work with us because we've done a good job. We've won. We do that because we will tell you once, let's say you would vote to go in April or just pick a date. There's 2 tracks. There's the political track. There's the educational track. The educational track is the district, along with the Board of Education, putting a program together that we would hand to you and say, this is our suggestion of running an educational program to the community, explaining what's on the ballot, what's in it, what the benefits are, what the negative, all of that, how you would do it from mailings to social media. We would give you that. Follow this. Or you could hire us to do it, either way. But we would put you in a place to do it. The political track is one where for those that were at the interview for the RFP process, we have a 2-company track. My company runs the community engagement process. We have a sister company called Core Strategies that runs the political process. We are turnkey immediately running, getting that committee up and running that you talked about. We help raise money. Typically, we do go to some of the unions to raise money. IEA or IFT, I can't remember. IEA. So IEA has a political committee called IPACE that funds referendums. Historically, the ones that we have run will get somewhere between $20,000 and $60,000 from IPACE alone. And then we obviously ask other companies that work within the district or work within the community for funds. And so we've always raised the money. And so if those are concerns for whatever referendum, we make sure that things are done properly.
But at this point, we haven't hired you to do that.
I know that, yes.
And we would also have to pay you additional.
You could do the education piece on your own. We would literally hand you a roadmap and say, go at it. And it's pretty logical, easily to do. They've obviously followed, one of the things that we've always said is we want to leave you in a better place than when we came. And so that's one where there have been maybe 40% of the districts that have hired us to do that because they're like, listen, we have to educate kids. We don't want to deal with that. And then some that have great resources and said, yeah, we can take care of it. And that's fine. The one that won this last time, we gave them the roadmap, they ran with it, and they won. The political side is obviously something that, we have a company that runs political campaigns, 12 years political campaign. So yes, the school wouldn't hire that. The group of community members, the volunteers that run the campaign would hire them. And then they would only get paid if we help raise the money. The win-win.
Okay.
I'll pipe up. While I appreciate your research and your expertise on the board, I also feel that history does not always dictate future outcomes. Things change. 2008 was a long time ago, and the community changes. I tend to defer to experts because this is not my field. That being said, I don't know that I necessarily support these two options too, and we're like up against it here. It's like either pick these two or we gotta wait. So that's my opinion on everything here.
Is there an opinion, not just you, but everyone, about waiting for the other 2 board members before we make the decision?
Well, that's not all we're saying, though. We would be saying waiting to.
Right.
Yeah, unless we call it
Or
a special
call
meeting.
a special meeting.
I think we have a lot of questions about the options. I think we have a lot of questions about missing board members in the process. I don't think we're ready to.
If we're gonna spend tens of millions of dollars, I tend to prefer have everybody vote on it. Or recommend, I guess we're not actually recommending spending tens of millions of dollars. I would like to hear everybody's opinion, and that gives me more time to mull over my thoughts on this. Because I still would like to go with the field house, but you're telling me it's not a good idea, so.
What we're telling you for sure is going with the $122 million is not supported by the community. And so something at the 74 million or below, how you drive at what you want to do is the decision that the board has to make. Obviously, you have the details. You have our job was to give you a menu of items that were put forth that the community supports and ranking them. And so how you choose that, and don't get me wrong, there's times that maybe this community doesn't understand the need for something that maybe you still have to do anyways. But what do you lead with? You lead with what the community wants. And so your referendum question, we'll talk about those. But if you choose not to go tonight, you certainly don't have to go with the 2 options. You can then take the data that we have and as a group talk about what you think should happen. We're just telling you $122 million would almost assuredly defeat a referendum. And so if you're the ones, the 74, we think because of the economy, under 70 would be kind of the good point where, we think that you would be successful in November. Now, the other one, I still think you can be successful, but our opinion is November is going to be the most favorable. But once again, you have a community that's very engaged. And so to your point, you never know what happens.
That led me to a question. So if we educate the community better about the needs for or desires for a field house, is there any way to extrapolate from your numbers what the likelihood of that passing would be?
So one of the things that we have done with different clients is said, all right, to get to a certain level, you would have to go through a large explanation process. And so that is something that certainly could happen. We could help you with it, set you up, you could probably even run it by yourself. We literally, if we have data that doesn't come in that says, hey, you can go to referendum or people don't quite understand this, we say, yes, but why don't we give it time? Let's run a program. Let's run an engagement program where we specifically talk about that and the needs. You'd have to build it around that and then say, okay, but then our cost would be 100 million or, something like that. Certainly that's something that's possible, for sure.
What's the deadline for April?
Mid-January?
I believe it's January 16th.
About mid-January.
So if we're doing a straw poll, I'm in favor of waiting.
You want to do a straw poll? I'm in favor of waiting. All right. Unanimous vote. Well, let's hear it. So is there a waiting, perhaps doing a special board meeting? Or waiting and just putting off until the spring?
Waiting for the consolidated election cycle.
I'm there, but
Waiting for the consolidated election cycle.
I'm fine with that, but we should schedule some time in one of the next coming meetings to go through these options.
That's what I was gonna request or ask. What direction would you like from us to bring back more information? What information? Those types of things to make sure that we're on track with what we bring back to the board. And the timeline, should the board move forward to January, just the timeline to have us prepared by then.
So do we need an official motion to table?
Yeah, because there's a recommendation.
Okay, so we need a motion to table.
Thank you.
Item J2.
And we're here to
I'll make the motion. Make the motion to table item J2.
Second.
Excuse me 1 second, Dr. Poop.
Yeah, before you can vote, I just want to say thank you because this does pretty much conclude our work with our engagement consultants. And so I just want to say thank you for helping us to engage our community. Mr. Critidan, you're not off the hook because you're our architect. We're going to need you. So we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for letting me talk before your vote.
And I would share the same thing with that, is that shared.
Yes.
Yeah, whether the board goes to referendum November, April, or not at all, at least now the community's given us feedback and we know what the direction is, the priority that the board can now discuss for a couple months.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
And there may be a committee that calls you up. Hires you at some point. So we can't do it. Somebody else
is helping them raise funds.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess if we can't do it, how does that happen? Random stranger says, I'm going to start a committee? Okay.
Yep.
All right. We have to vote.
And I would put it out there that normally it would come from that core community committee group. So.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor that has been made and seconded, and we need a roll call. So it is to table item J2 to a later.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Bye, Dan. See you later.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. The last item is J3, the approval of the COVID-19 mitigation plan for the 2022-23 school year.
All right, give me a second. Yep. Will you please change to the presentation? Then let's make sure I can do this. Beautiful.
Got it?
All right, I think we got this one. Thank you.
Thank you. At the last board of education meeting in July, we had some conversation on the mitigation plan and the next steps. And as the board took action previously 2 other times on mitigation plan, the board asked for the information to be brought back so we could take action, or the board could take action again tonight after discussion and questions for the plan to start the school year. So a couple things to note as we go through the plan. Thank you, Dr. Fuchs. We are planning to communicate with our families tomorrow or Wednesday. So as soon as we have the finalized plan approved by the board tonight, we will then share that with our staff and our families so they're aware of the next steps and they're aware of what the plans are for the school year. So, if you recall from February, one of the things that we had guidance and latitude on was a local plan based on policy and statute, that each Board of Education does have the flexibility to create their own plan. And this plan that we're sharing with you, we have worked with the Kane County Health Department as well as the Kane County Regional Office of Education to work with and be sure that we brought a plan to the board that was approved by both of those groups, as we have all of our other previous plans. The updated guidance, you'll hear probably 3 or 4 times throughout the presentation tonight that the guidance has changed and will continue to change. And when we get updated guidance, we will be sure we interpret that through the health department and legal if necessary and bring it back to the board. This information has been changed 3 times since it originally came out, from July 7th, July 27th, and August 2nd. So it is the type of thing where information is changing regularly. And so wanted just the board to know that it is our local plan and we do have that authority. The other thing you'll hear a few times too throughout the presentation is we talk about pre-COVID. There are some practices that we're going to recommend that we work back towards in pre-COVID. That's not to say COVID is not there, and we're not going to continue to investigate and look at mitigations, which we will certainly do, but there are some points that we will share that are definitely pre-COVID. We've talked about this with Cabinet, our ad team, and I've met with KE leadership to make sure that we are on the same page and we're in agreement with a successful plan to move forward. Thank you, Dr. Fuchs. This slide just highlights slides that will follow behind it. And one slide I want to share that is new, students with symptoms, about the 6th bullet point down, is a new slide. And we have the information corresponding with that. That was not in the packet originally. We were going to include that under the testing and isolation, but due to the fact that students with symptoms is different enough and has enough other factors, we thought it warranted its own slide. So that is something that is different and new from what you received in the board packet that was in the packet. So the first thing that I'll share before I turn over to Dr. Fuchs to talk through a couple other ones, the masking protocols. The recommendation is that for now, given the current climate circumstances that we have, that each family, student, staff has their choice to move forward with masking or not masking. And again, that's each family's choice right now. And should there be an outbreak or should there be a reason we have to follow through with more information, we do have the agreement with the health department that we'll talk with the Kane County Health Department to see if there's any other mitigations that are needed. And as we've talked about previously, all of our mitigations that we would look for or recommend through the health department are from the lowest level to the highest level. So we would start first, or the lowest impact. So we would start with either a classroom, a department, rather than just doing a across the district plan or changes. So we want to just impact the fewest students and staff members possible to try to ensure a start of a school year that has some pre-COVID type tentacles to it and some pre-COVID type ideas. The other piece is if there's an outbreak, we'll work with the health department to make sure that we're on the same page. And looking through any updated protocols or any updated guidance that we do receive, because we do get those updates. And then also just the last point, we'll continue for the masks that we do have left over, make those available to our students and staff for those that would like to wear a mask. And you will see on the next slide, as I turn it over to Dr. Fuchs, it does have the recommended strategies for low, medium, and high. And again, these are now the CDC recommended strategies, not our color scheme that we had from the spring. That was our district local plan from February that we approved. So now this is the low, medium, high from the CDC and their recommendations.
So I have a question before we move on. So if we have an outbreak and the King County Health Department says everyone in fourth grade needs to mask up, then we might say to families, you need to send your child to school masked.
Yes.
In a class, in a school, in a
Yes.
if there's an outbreak and the King County Health Department tells us that that's the protocol that we should use.
Yes, what we would do, and that kind of goes back to kind of the pre-COVID piece. If there was pre-COVID, either a flu outbreak or some other health crisis, we would work with the health department and say, based on this set of information, based on these cases, the situation, this is what we currently have at this building or this office or a bus or wherever it might be, work with the health department. And again, they will make those recommendations. And then we'll have to interpret whether it's just a recommendation again, or if we have to wear them, or impose it and make students or staff wear masks. Because right now, throughout the guidance, even at the highest level, there is not a requirement anywhere in the guidance. So that would be something new or different from the health department that we would discuss.
Right. But that would be, it's different because it would be an outbreak and not just a high
Yes.
level of community transmission. Okay.
Yes.
When you said we would discuss, did you mean the board or administration?
Administration. We would, because of the turnaround time, we would want to get to the health department immediately, because a lot of it is the data that they have to receive either from the school, the district, or from the building. And then, again, it would depend on if the board gives me the authority to do that again. One of our plans that we approved, it said based on the shifting guidance, the board gave me the guidance or the direction to make some of those shifts. Other times we brought it back to the board for more discussion. So,
But in an outbreak status, you need to pivot quickly.
Yes.
Right.
Right, the board doesn't usually get to decide if there's a flu outbreak and what we would handle.
No, that would be something that would happen quicker because of the timeline and the return, especially if it's one of the months if there's only one meeting.
But then that we're kind of ceding local control to the health department then, aren't we?
The health department can only make recommendations. Health department, unless it's something extremely severe, would not be able to shut us down. They could make or impose sanctions or impose any of the mitigations. They could make those recommendations. Typically in the past, based on what the recommendations are or the situation, we've accepted those prior to COVID. So each instance would be different.
But it changed with COVID. They made lots of recommendations and not all of them were good. So
yeah,
we're the school district administration. So what you're saying is that the administration will consider what they tell you and then make a judgment based on that, not necessarily directly follow what the health department is telling us to do?
Assuming we give the administration the authority to make that call, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's the question I meant. Yes. Okay. So if the CDC decides that on the next slide, this slide, universal masking is recommended, that doesn't mean we're doing it. We're still keeping local control of.
Correct.
And that's also CDC, and we were talking about the King County Health Department.
I understand that.
And only in an outbreak status.
But an outbreak status was 3 cases, if I remember right.
Well, if you recall, last year we had 3 different outbreak instances. One of the instances with additional mitigations were recommended. We followed those. And then 2, there were no additional mitigations that were needed. So it's truly a case by case based on what the outbreak is, how many students, and where.
Just like it is for flu.
Correct.
And other issues.
The only thing I'd like to add to the CDC slide is to point out that at all 3 levels, masks are recommended and not required. I think that's important to point out. Additionally, on the right-hand side, the prevention strategy is to ensure access to diagnostic testing for symptomatic persons. And so we definitely, our families need access to that as well. We are not planning to do the test to stay program that they implemented, that we implemented last year, but I'm going to go ahead and do the next slide and talk a little bit about shield testing. So Dr. Layden and I met, we had a phone conference with Shield, Illinois. They are still providing shield testing if we want it for free to public education, K-12 in Illinois. However, they've got some minimums of 50 tests per site. So if you have less than 50, they won't allow it. But they do have a new option called an unobserved test. And what this option is that students would be given a vial that they could take home at night, deposit their spit in, and then bring it back and drop it in the box in the next morning, and it would go in for testing. From our understanding, you can mix and match on-site and unobserved tests. Shield, Illinois is going to come out and meet with me tomorrow morning, and I'll be able to know for sure exactly all the details of the rules. And then what we're planning to do, depending on what we learn tomorrow, is to survey our families to see if we think we have enough students that would participate to have 50 per site. And then tomorrow I'll be asking, if we don't get 50, can we combine? And what kinds of rules and things will they allow us to do? We feel that shield testing is one of those things that we can do for our community and for our families that would still want it. We may not have enough families that want it, that allow us to do it. So we're going to have to play it by ear. But as we've learned, we have a very engaged community as well as families. And so once we learn what we do in the morning, when Shield, Illinois comes in to visit, we'll be able to communicate with our families and make a decision on shield testing. Are there any questions before I go to the next slide?
Shield testing's no charge to the district, right? They're
No
providing
charge
free
at all.
service.
They offer it completely for free.
But if we don't hit the 50, do we get charged?
No, we don't get charged. They just won't do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other benefit of the unobserved, which is new, the unobserved test is less time for students out of class before they would have to go out of class or out of a passing period or at some period to go perform the test, complete it, and then go back to class. And there's also less staff involved to oversee it and supervise it, communicate, read the results, those types of things. So if we do move forward, likely we'll encourage unobserved testing to try to keep as many students in class as possible, for as long as possible.
So this is just for families who want to have continued regular testing.
Weekly.
Yes.
Weekly testing.
Weekly testing is
This
shield
isn't
testing.
for, you see a kid that looks like they have symptoms and you need to test
No.
them, so you're going to send a vial home with them.
No.
Okay.
It's those that elected sign up.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Just
Yep.
wanted to clarify.
All right, next slide. Cleaning protocol and hand washing practices. Our current cleaning protocol will continue to be followed at all of our facilities. And similar to the end of last year, if we have an outbreak or a number of cases, or if there's a specific area that needs additional cleaning, we will make sure that that happens. We do not have the capacity to do the enhanced cleaning that we did 2 years ago at all of our facilities every day. But when it warrants, if there's cases or outbreaks, etc., we'll bring in extra and clean those areas in the evenings. We will continue to encourage our students and staff to regular hand wash, proper hygiene. We'll still continue to have hand sanitizer stations and small bottles of hand sanitizers that have been donated. If anybody requests any, we'll be sure to hand those out and make them available. Okay. All right. So I have 2 slides on a positive COVID test and isolation. First of all, as we all know, staying at home when you're sick does lower the risk of spreading COVID-19. So if we have students that test positive, they will need to stay home for 5 days, but they will be able to return after day 5 when they're symptom free. They have to be both day 5 and symptom free. Once they return to school, it is recommended, not required, similar to last spring, that masks be worn for an additional 5 days. A difference this year is a negative test result is not required for the students to return after 5 days. Yep, go ahead.
So if my daughter's sick, and I just call the attendance line and say she's sick, we're not required to say what they're sick with.
I'm going to go over the symptom one in a minute. Hold that question for me.
Sure.
This slide, let's deal with, we know somebody's positive,
Okay.
and then we'll go through your what ifs in 2 slides, okay?
Sure.
Thank you. So the difference again is no negative test result is required to return. Additionally, the test that tells us they're positive could be a home test or a test from a facility. Whatever it is that they're reporting that they have a positive test, we'll ask that they stay home. We'll continue to use the decision tree, which is regularly updated by IDPH and will be posted on our website. When you go to the next slide, it describes again, day 0 is your first full day that symptoms have developed, or the day that your test specimen was collected. And if you've tested, we'd like you to isolate for 5 additional days from day 0 before returning to school. If Kane County Health Department advises us, we may be doing contact tracing. Otherwise, we will not be contact tracing for specific positive cases. But if the health department calls and says, we really need you to do this, we will most likely comply with the contact tracing to help slow the spread so that we don't become in an outbreak status.
So what are you anticipating would cause the King County Health Department to ask you to do that? Is it because they fear an outbreak? Is it because they just change their have they not decided completely yet? I mean, I'm trying to figure out.
I don't think they've decided completely yet because they're waiting to see how case rates are. But when you ask the initial question, it makes me think of specific situations where you're starting to see kids get sick, test positive, and they belong to the same homeroom, they belong to the same athletic team, they belong to this something that's linking them together. They may say, hey, wait, why don't you make sure that everybody else is testing negative?
I don't like where this is going, because what's the next logical step after we know who the people are?
Watch them for symptoms?
Or no, the next logical step or what we did in the past is you stay home.
Okay, we haven't done that yet at all. And we're not doing that.
You just
only if
It's part of this plan.
it's part of the plan.
The past, yes, but the plan, no.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not going to use contact tracing unless if it's recommended by the health department.
And they'd recommend you contact trace, and then they don't want generic information for a file. There's going to be something that follows after that.
And in our experience from right now, it's going to be, Mr. Carey, you've been
exposed.
Exposed. Thank you for exposed. Please watch your symptoms. And if you start to feel badly, please make sure you do the right things. You test, you stay home if you're sick. It's letting people know our intention is not to contact trace and have healthy people stay home.
Contact tracing is, and we need to emphasize again, not to have students stay home. Because of contact tracing and close contacts, there were far too many students that were home due to being a close contact or contact tracing that, from what the health department said, that had too few people then testing positive, and even if they tested positive, they couldn't trace it back necessarily to the school or to that group of students. So at this point right now, the contact tracing and isolation is something that is not being recommended, or is not something we are starting the school year with.
Only positives.
All right, so just maybe I'm getting a little too defensive or whatever the word is. So contact tracing won't happen until the health department recommends it, if they do at some point recommend it, and then the administration would have to agree to follow their recommendation to provide the data back to the health department, which would trigger another event, which we don't know what said event would be.
And we don't even know what that's going to look like through the health department, because the health department has shared that they have the same goal as the state superintendent to keep as many students in school as possible. That's why the contact tracing and the isolation is greatly minimized in this plan and this local control that we have.
Yes.
And they didn't have enough personnel to do it in the first time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I would think that they're trying to.
Yes.
Okay.
Because our students will be in school more than they won't be, and the ones that are staying home are sick, all of our students, when they're home, can access their schoolwork by utilizing Canvas and communicating with their teachers. Families can work with their teachers to request any work that they're missing. Otherwise, there will not be synchronous learning happening at the same time as a student at home who's sick. And then we, the administration, we will be monitoring daily positive cases, but we will not be sending the daily email reporting those cases to staff and families. So we will still need to keep track of how many positives and where they're at, but we won't be reporting it on a daily basis to our families and to the community.
Nor will you necessarily know if little Tommy calls in sick. He's not going to tell you why.
There's slides for that coming up.
I thought we were there.
We are. Next slide. Let's get there. Let's get there. So students with symptoms. Thank you.
Did we skip after school?
Yeah,
Did we?
Symptoms is the new one.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, you guys don't have it. It's up on the screen. Thank you. Like, we added that to help. All right. Students with symptoms will be assessed by our school nurses. Just like when any student is sick, they go to the school nurse. If the symptoms warrant removal from school, rest by the student, or further evaluation by a medical doctor, we'll ask the students to stay home or go home. That's just like it was before we knew about COVID. If symptoms are non-COVID related, such as a headache from being outside in the heat, allergies, known allergies, or a doctor's note indicating something other than COVID, students will be allowed to return to school. If symptoms get worse over time, we will ask them to stay home until they are symptom-free. Parents may choose to have the student tested for COVID in an effort to stop the spread if needed. Choice. And then lastly, students will be allowed to return once they are symptom-free, fever-free, and/or diarrhea-free for more than 24 hours. Ryan, what is your question that I can help with this?
It was more of a statement. So we may or may not know if someone has COVID based on how the parent calls them into the absent line.
That's correct.
Okay.
But we do hope that the Kaneland parents, if they find that their student is positive, tries to help stop the spread.
Oh, absolutely. but without help, we're not gonna, community-wide, we may not have accurate numbers as to what's going on, because with the at-home tests and the other testing places, we're not getting the data that we were getting a year ago.
I agree.
The at-home test changed everything in the spring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Changed everything.
All right. Thank you. Next slide, and you guys have this one.
Teresa, you've been waiting for it, so here it is, the after-school activities. We are going to go back to as we practiced in the spring and pre-COVID, unless there's a reason to consider a mitigation. We're going to go back to regular participation for both athletics and activities as outlined with the same rules that we have above. So the back to school is the same as the classroom is the same as athletics and activities. And again, if there's any new changes, as we saw sometimes it was different for an indoor activity, outdoor activity, any recommendations that the board has, that the health department has or the state board, we would always look at those. But we are truly trying to get our students back to pre-COVID when and where we can, as often as we can. And then the last part too is guests. We will allow guests back into our buildings. For a while, we didn't have guests, we didn't have field trips. A number of those things were minimized or eliminated. We will be welcoming our guests back, still following the same regular security guidance, checking in through the office, getting permission, and then also asking all of our guests to be symptom-free when they come to the schools. And the last slide, before we see if there are additional questions or board action, again, we expect our families and encourage all of our families to follow the mitigation measures in accordance with the plan. Stay home when we're sick, just like pre-COVID, especially fever, diarrhea, throwing up, those kinds of things. Students need to be home, need to be where they can feel better. And then the third bullet point, one of the things I was really proud of the Kaneland community, Kaneland environment. In the spring, I do not recall once masks became optional, a family choice in February, March. Very little discipline, very little issues or concerns with students choosing to wear a mask or staff choosing to wear a mask or not choosing to wear a mask. Either way, I think it has now just become ingrained in our community to be accepting of others. And that's something we would expect on all other fronts. And we would continue to expect that here also. And then just following our core values, integrity, respect, responsibility, citizenship, and commitment to excellence as we start a school year and practice any new mitigations and the expectation of coming back, understanding pre-COVID truly as much as we can, as often as we can in all instances, but then determining if there's a reason to consider something different, looking at that critically, and then determining the next steps. Questions?
So I have one that's kind of not, just based on what you told us. There is talk that in the fall that there will be an Omicron specific booster that may be available. Will the district, as they did in the past, try to get out in front of and offer vaccines on site for staff and or students? Will we look into those possibilities and still participate in those things at the same types of levels that we did before?
Yeah, last, if you recall, I think twice.
Just by choice.
Yes.
I don't mean to compel anyone.
No, we did have, I think, 2 or 3 different opportunities on campus when, I can't remember if it was Jewel, Osco, or which pharmacy, or the health department, they reached out to us, asked if we'd be interested in hosting in those types of events, as we would look out for any opportunity for any of our community or staff members. If that opportunity presents itself and we're available, we would continue to host.
Okay, great,
and
thanks.
And communicate that to families.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
We good?
Yep.
So, no further questions. I'll entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the COVID-19 mitigation plan for the 2022-2023 school year.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. So that concludes new business, and we'll move on now to the superintendent and board report.
Yes, thank you. A few back-to-school highlights and updates. It felt a lot like school today. We had, at the high school, we had all of our new teachers from across the district. At the high school, we had the opportunity to meet each other, meet some administrators, and become acclimated to Kaneland School District, so it was great to see them. 1 week from today, we have our all-staff gathering back at the high school. It will be excellent to see all of our staff back together at the high school. Previously, we had done that for a number of years, but due to some of the changes with COVID, we weren't allowed to do that for 2 years. So it'll be great to see our entire staff back together. And then on Wednesday, the 17th, our students come back to school, which is clearly the highlight of any start of a school year. The energy, as I've shared with a number of people, the energy to start a school year is one of the most exciting things, probably only toppled by the energy to end the school year. So it will be great to see our students for sure next Wednesday. Jumpstart started today. I'm going to come over tomorrow, visit a little bit during it, saw a couple pictures, good turnout as our middle schoolers get ready to transition to harder. And then the last thing would just be board members and all of our community members. While we provide some of these updates, school principals and the school websites have way more information. So please check that information to learn more about specifics of lunches and back to school fun lunches and bus stops and pickup and schedules from the actual buildings themselves. So excited to be starting school again. That's all I have.
I don't have anything this evening.
Okay, board members.
Nada.
All right. Topics for future agendas. Anyone have a burning question?
Well, we tabled that subject, so I'm assuming that's a future agenda, but I'm not sure
Yeah,
exactly.
that's different. Huh?
What's that?
That's different because we tabled a specific thing, so we know that. So we're good.
But there was, where I was going with it was there's, people wanted more information, but I don't know what that was.
Yeah, Todd, you had asked what you wanted from you.
To regroup, reflect, and we will communicate back to the board with possible timelines, possible dates, and then see what information and what those next steps might look like. So,
Okay.
we'll
Thank
work on
you.
that. You're welcome.
Anything else? Okay, this is the second opportunity for public comment, using same guidelines and rules as before. And we have 2 people signed up. The first person is Mr. Scott Stalcup.
Scott Stalkup, parent of 3 in the district of Sugar Grove. Couple items, the referendum and the fundraising that was spoken about. I think one thing that needs to be conveyed is the status of the 2008 bond and where that stands. Is it paid off? How many years are left on it, etc. That's going to be an important piece if you're asking for more money. Secondly, to that is our school fees to parents of kids are the highest around. So you're asking for parents to give more money on top of the highest fees. And with the Fox Valley Career, you're asking us to pay taxes to improve that, pay additional tuition for that, but you're not getting any tax money from those other entities. So you're asking Kaneland parents to pay twice for that. So I think there needs to be some analysis and information provided with that. With your COVID plan, and if you do offer vaccination shots from a local pharmacy, are you going to offer the flu shots, shingle shots, other vaccinations as well? Or are you specifically only going to do COVID? Secondly, I was a little unclear on the testing you had testing on there. You can do a home test or another test to know if you're positive or not, but you just mentioned test to return. I assume it's the same test to return. Last year it was not. Just looking for clarification. If any test to return is acceptable. Last year, home testing was not. We had to have it from a physician, and that should be clarified, I guess. And then if you do ask a student to stay home, does that mean you are quarantining them through CDC or through Kane County Health? Is that being quarantined? How is that being followed according to the statutes? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And Ms. Albano.
Hi, Sheila Albano again, and I know everybody wants to come, so I'll keep this very quick. One, I want to say thank you for being deliberative this evening in the facilities discussions. I think that that is exactly what we need to show to our community. As somebody who's lived here my whole life and several generations, it is not a small thing that Kaneland is the center of this entire community. That is not even hardly begins to get at the heart of it. Without Kaneland, we have no reason to be involved with Sugar Grove, Elburn, Maple Park, Caneville, really, other than someplace to go shop or eat. There's no other reason. If once your kids hit middle school, they're best friends for the rest of their lives. You may live in Maple Park and they live down in Montgomery, and you're just going to keep traveling back and forth. But that is what makes it. That's what makes it work. Unfortunately, we no longer have the kinds of newspaper coverage. Thankful that Mr. Walker's here this evening, but you can't get the kind of reporting across multiple newspapers that we used to be able to get. So my what I want to say is I fully believe we can pass a referendum. I've thought that from the beginning, but it needs buy-in. It needs deep buy-in, and that means not just the admin and not just the board, but multiple people from teachers and coaches and non-elderly and whatever, however you put that committee together to go out and sell. And I realize the referendum committee is a little bit different. You need a multiple group of people to put your plan together in order to go sell it with a referendum. If you don't, you have no chance of passing it. Just that simple. If you give them and explain to them, I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, he just mentioned Fox Valley. We talked about Fox Valley. They actually do pay for part of that tax increase, but they pay through their tuition percentages.
But we're also paying taxes as
Right,
taxes
correct.
people in the district.
So,
They're
but I
not.
mean, there is a, sorry, I only have 34 seconds. There is information out there, and we want you and everyone else to understand what is going to happen, or we can't pass the referendum. So information is critical, and it's the issue has been in this district for decades. Everybody complains about information always, even when it's there. So please use us. There are multiple people out there who are wanting to help you put this stuff together because we love this school district and we want our school to look better than it does as well. So thank you, and thank you for what you've done tonight.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional public comments that weren't signed up for? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. And the Board of Education is scheduled to have a closed session tonight. There will be no action taken following the session, so after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. So I'm looking for a motion to go into closed session to real quick, sorry, to discuss the following matters. As I should have said before, I apologize. Under the Open Meetings Act, Section 2C2, Section 2C1, and Section 2C11. And now the motion
So moved.
Second.
and a roll call, please.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
Mr. Carey,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
We're going, where are we going?
Stay right here.
We stay here.
Okay.